Welcome back to Affirmations. I want you all to like, share, and subscribe. I want to thank my subscribers and any new subscribers that I have. And welcome to those who are swinging through. Okay. I'm going to start by, y'all got this torch thing. It's kind of scary. We're going to light our Palo Santo. Let's see how this goes. Ooh, y'all so on fire. Giving you all some Palo Santo. Wishing everyone mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical health. Okay. Also, let's see what else we want to say. I was a little scared of that torch, made me lose track of my thought. Okay, for those of you that are new, we on this channel we tackle the topic of healing slave trauma. We're going to be using. Okay, come on along. We're going to be using the DBT deck for clients and therapists, 101 mindful practices to manage the stress, regulate emotions, and build better relationships. Okay, this information will be in the description box. Also, information about how to find a therapist or if you want to book with me. Okay, also know there are people who are out there that may act as me, but no, I will never reach out to you. Okay, so be aware of that. Okay. Let's see what else. Also, too, we always start off our. Uh, let's see. The mind is. I got a new phone today. That's what it is, y'all. I've been having video issues, and so I'm trying to get used to this particular phone. But we do start off with our saying, "Death and life is in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof." Have you been feeding yourself fresh or rotten fruit? I always want to be mindful of what we are speaking to ourselves, as well as what we're speaking out loud, as well as what we're speaking about others. It's okay to vent, okay, but we want to make sure we're not being malicious or lying on others. Sometimes that can activate reap what you sow, okay? So, with that, we are going to pull from this particular deck, okay, to kind of see what we're going to talk about today. Let's just randomly pick. Let's see what we got. Okay, we got something called opposite to emotion for anger. It says anger causes us to go on the attack. Resist the urge by avoiding the person you are angry with until your anger calms. Address situations that feed anger only when you are in your wise mind. That's a concept we talked about earlier. If you struggle with ongoing frustration and anger, counteract those emotions by choosing to be actively nice towards others. Okay, this is very interesting. So we're going to kind of break it down a bit. So anger causes us to go on attack, right? And also, too, we need to be aware that sometimes people love that anger energy from us. There's also this kind of concept that sometimes, especially when you haven't done anything to anyone, especially when we start talking about male female dynamics, a lot of times when there's this conflict and this kind of battling, sometimes there's a connection with sexual tension. So sometimes, of course, people, when they are sexually frustrated, sometimes they will pick fights and they can draw energy from that. Okay, so we have to be aware of when it just doesn't make sense, like, wow, we all this battling. Okay. And so that's one thing when you deal with male female dynamics. So sometimes that anger underneath that could be sexual tension sometimes, and people provoking. And one of the things we've talked about is, again, we're always talking about the different roles. You have that of master, that of slave. And so, again, what would master do? We were always, again, the first sex slaves and kind of forced to have sex under these conditions with all this anger, sometimes after beatings and things like that. So sometimes we have been programmed to enjoy and actually get the most out of sex when there's after conflict, right? They talk about make up to break up. They got songs about it, right? So we have to watch that cycle, right? Because actually you'll find people are angry. They don't want to do kind things and then have a sexual experience. They want to be in a battle and then have the sexual experiences, right? So that's a master type mentality. And then for the person who's receiving that and agitated, and I even look at that statement where they say, don't go to bed angry. See, that's interesting. And I'm realizing it's deeper than that. They're telling you don't go to bed angry because when you look at it, who mostly goes to bed angry a lot of the times is to let you know, don't go to bed angry because guess what? We're going to have to, what's going to have to happen, right? So it's almost like a lot of times anger, you just can't cut that off. But they say, don't go to bed angry, meaning put that aside. We're going to have to be able to connect in a sexual way, right? So that takes time. So again, we have to be able to, or we take it on the role of slave. We're going to have to be able to set boundaries around that, right? Which can create a lot of anger. Because again, master required us to be able to submit and to sexually perform even under distress, right? But that's very toxic. And if that's something that you require and that you find that you really kind of enjoy sex more with this kind of battle and then making someone perform sexual acts with you when you know there's tension, understand that's unhealthy and toxic, okay? And that's something that is going to require some counseling. You may want a journal to kind of look at that. Also, too, a lot of programming, we talk about how we're programmed a certain way. That this conquering type, we talk about patriarchy and this whole thing. They colonized the world with religion. Patriarchy goes hand in hand, this type of oppressive state, right? It's abusive in nature. So we have to figure that out. Let's see, it says resist the urge by avoiding the person you're angry with, right? Again, what do we learn in slavery? We are not allowed to be angry, right? And so even sometimes in relationships, families, we're not allowed to have our anger and separate. But that is our human right to be able to have a break. Sometimes we have to let people know I'm frustrated right now. And I'll let you know when I'm ready to really speak right now. I'm needing time alone. If you find a person does not respect that boundary, understand that is abusive in nature. They're taking on that master role. But we should be able to do that. But it's very scary to do that because, again, we've all been programmed to submit to that type of master type personality mentality in a family member, friend, or even a mate. So it takes a lot of bravery to put boundaries around ourselves and only go around if we're ready. And then some people will have it no other way. They insist on this kind of tension. They like it. They get off on it, right? And so you got to figure out, because again, what does that do to your body when you start talking about cortisol levels and stress levels? That also increases different illnesses. But some people they like that, that's how they feel good. And so it's very abusive in nature. So there's a spectrum of abuse. You got physical abuse, which you got all kind of different levels of abuse. Okay. It says address situations that feed anger, being wise. It says if you struggle with ongoing frustration and anger, it wants you to counteract it by choosing to be actively kind to others. Because what will happen is when we're frustrated with someone else, guess what? We take the anger out in other places. So we have to be very aware of that we're not doing that. With this, someone has us stirred up. And I've seen this, they call it, reactive abuse, where somebody will stir somebody up and then the person's hollering and frustrated and agitating. And then the person sits back quiet and says, see how they act? They're just so mean. When they've been stirred up and the person's not really aware of what's going on, that this is a type of mind game that goes on. These are all these type of mind games that were played on us even in slavery. So we've picked up some of that behavior. Okay. And then sometimes we're even doing it with our children, provoking, right? Right? Or sometimes children may do it with parents, right? Or a mate may do it with a mate, family members, right? So we have to be aware of this, okay? So this was a good one. Opposite to emotion for anger. Yeah, where we kind of remove ourselves. And again in those marriage beds, that's the whole thing. Having to set that boundary. I know in the past that we'd be angry and I'm frustrated and then we kind of make up through sex, but that's not good for me. I know I need my space and I'm going to need these certain things in order to get back on track to even want to be touched. But again, that's something that's unheard of. We haven't been allowed to do that, but we need to think about that. And even children having a right to be able to, which is very tricky. How do you avoid a parent when they're in control of your entire life? But sometimes you have to be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove, knowing how not to step into traps. One of the things I always talk about is acceptance. Accepting for every negative, there's a positive. People have normally consistent behaviors. You should be able to strategize. You should know it so well to where you already know when it's coming. You should be able to stay 12 steps ahead of that. A lot of times to be able to shift and avoid a thing. So we got to be more mindful in accepting people for who they are. And a lot of times we don't want to admit it. Okay. So we have to look at that. Let's see. So another thing we always do, for those of you that are new, we always will kind of look at an affirmation. This right here is a little cute affirmation that I used to use. I'm going to pull it out today. 100 positive affirmation cards. Okay. Need to put that in the description box as well. This is a cute little deck. So let's just see what we get today to close this out. Okay. Something flipped, but it didn't pop out. Let's see if I can get it to do. Inhale. Exhale. We're okay. We do talk about sensitive topics. No, this is a safe place. If it's hitting a sore spot or you find yourself getting angry, it's possible that you are struggling with this issue. Okay, so it's just a sign. We got I am worthy. I am worthy. And it says, what should I do to make myself feel worthy and successful? So again, right, if we're dealing with used to being in these type of situations where we're agitated and then forced to smile and perform and not have time outs to be able to separate from people that are being emotionally abusive is what it is. It can make us not feel worthy. Okay. And people will start making you feel like you're not worthy, right? If you participate in that. Okay. And it starts to affect your mental, your emotional, even your physical health. Right. So you have to figure out, what are my boundaries? I encourage us to journal. Hide your journal. I tell people, I have clients that say, "Oh, I don't want to journal. I'm scared someone's going to find it." I say, "We've hid things before. You know how to hide that. Hide, go ahead and hide that for something that's good, or sometimes you can have notes on your phone or do voice recordings, whichever works." Okay. But yeah, what should I do to make myself feel worthy and successful? And sometimes that's limiting contact. Sometimes that's setting boundaries, right? How can I appreciate my own worth? And is that, and do we do that by not allowing people to diminish our worth? Right? So we have to listen to the signals of our body. Our emotions are a gift, they're a signal to what's going on around us. Okay. And so, with that, I want to appreciate you all for joining me today. Again, please like, share, and subscribe. Do look at the description box for any, books, decks that I recommend. And I always end these with the saying, everyone has a right to heal from trauma, even a race nation. And until next time, bye.